Super Smash Cricket is rocking and rolling. Today, the day of recording, Tuesday the 9th of January, we've got Canterbury hosting Northern Districts, men and women, which is great because the last time we saw Canterbury play, they kind of shat the bed. The men did so in rather interesting fashion because it was like what had happened earlier in the women's game seemed to leave a bad juju, bad aura, bad vibe at Hagley Oval. And while the Canterbury women did capitulate, far greater than the Breakers in the third quarter and the Wellington Phoenix woman, you know, my side of the niche case did capitulate the most. So big up to me. And
you can have that one. You can have that one. I watched all three. So,
the Canterbury men, they were just never in that contest. You know, they found batting really hard. Daryl Mitchell was the only bloke to score runs. On a home deck, they worked their way to 140 for 5, so they weren't scoring freely. They were finding it really difficult. And that includes, you know, batting lineup with Tom Latham, Henry Nichols, Daryl Mitchell, all those dudes. Auckland comes out against the bowling attack with Matt Henry, Will O'Rourke, Ish Sodhi, Michael Rapon, and Canterbury find batting super easy. So, like, no stage in that game did I feel like Canterbury were on top. So while the Canterbury women did capitulate, the Canterbury blokes never had a high point to capitulate from. They were just, like, cruising in first gear, and Auckland came out guns blazing with Finn Allen. I do want to just, like, we've talked around it, so I do want to talk about that capitulation because it was really interesting how the overseas imports were largely responsible for it. Because the way I broke it down in our newsletter via Substack, Leah Tahuhu took on over. I think she only conceded 3 runs. She took a wicket. Then Sarah Asmussen bowls an over. She only concedes 5 runs or whatever. Then Fatima Sana and Sophie Molyneux both bowl expensive overs as the 2 overseas imports. Meanwhile, the coach, Reece Morgan, was doing the sideline interview, and he was saying how it was like their last or second to last games of the tournament. So that was basically their farewell party. But they both bowl expensive overs, and then they're brought back for another over each in which they're expensive, but they also both bowl no balls. So, wow. And then there's just like, anytime I see it a lot, and they were talking about it yesterday with the Wellington woman versus Central Districts woman, the amount of fielders on the boundary that just allow singles. And I've seen it like in various games this season where teams in pretty decent positions, they just keep the fielders on the boundary, you know, long off is back, you've got deep mid wicket, you've got deep square leg, and teams get back into the game, but just dropping it there, get a single, get a single, get a single, push for 2, get a single, rotate the strike, and they just work their way back into the game, kind of because the fielding team has just put the fielders back on the boundary. It's something to watch out for. Like Jacob Oram said in his sideline commentary yesterday for Central Districts woman against Wellington, that they're not really in a position to, because Grant Elliott was saying they need to come up, stop the single. Jacob Orab saying we're not really in a position to do that. Like, kind of like we're not good enough to do that. So I'm sure the coaches have their reasons, the captains have their reason. Shout out to Frances Mackay. She was captaining the Canterbury capitulation, which wasn't, like, some of the fielding stuff you could poke holes at, but again, the overseas imports bowled the last 4 overs, 2 of which were expensive, and then 2 of which featured no balls, free hits, and all sorts of bad bowling shenanigans that lost them the game. But then 20 minutes later, Frances Mackay is commenting on the blokes game, doing a great professional job. So that was good stuff from her. Part of the Canterbury capitulation was also about Auckland, because the Auckland women, they're extremely underwhelming. So they've basically got 2 good players right now. Maddie Green, fantastic form. She is one of 4, 5, 6 White Ferns who are leading the run scorers. Then you've got Frances Mackay, former White Fern, should be a White Fern. Instead, she's doing commentary. So Susie Bates, Amelia Kerr, Maddie Green, Georgia Plimmer, Hannah Rowe, Kate Anderson are the leading run scorers. Maddie Green's fantastic. She played that innings beautifully, and then she got out. And I thought once she got out, it was game over. But then Canterbury fumbled their situation. And Auckland also have Sky Bowden, who has 10 wickets. She's the leading wicket taker in the Super Smash Women's. And so Auckland have those two players, and they literally have like no one else scoring runs. I think I wrote, they've got one batter averaging over 20, and they have one batter with a strike rate over 100. And that includes, you got Izzy Gaze, the wicketkeeper, White Fern's wicketkeeper batter. She's not doing anything. Molly Penfold, she's got like one wicket and average of 70, 8.8 RPO. She doesn't even bowl her full 4 overs. This is the premier fast bowler or young fast bowler in Aotearoa, as told to us by the White Ferns. She's not even getting through her full 4 overs. So aside from Sky Bowden, aside from Maddie Green, who are genuinely both excellent, like Maddie Green's fantastic, she's a White Fern, she's a top 5 White Fern in my rankings. She should be fantastic. She's a great captain as well. She's got good presence on the field, funky fielding positions. Then you've got Sky Bowden, youngster on the rise. She's a great cricketer as well. But the Auckland team, they're fragile. They don't look confident. Their young White Ferns aren't really doing anything. There is no way when Maddie Green gets out, Auckland should win that game. Because even like when Josie Penfold's batting, she's got no idea what's going on. She just, like, respectfully, again, she didn't even know they won the game, it looked like. Whereas Anna Browning is, like, she's vibrant, she's pushing for 2, she's all energy, she's playing her role nicely. I don't think she is a solid domestic cricketer yet. She's a good young player, but she's right. The best thing she did in that game was run hard for 2, so shout out to her. Josie Penfold literally had no idea what was going on. So that was a bit weird. But that sums up the whole Auckland vibe. Like they're kind of fragile. They're primed to collapse. And I was thinking that whole time, like, this Auckland team really represents the White Ferns. They're young players, picked on potential. They've got no real grit, no mana. They've got a couple of good players. So the status of this capitulation is I'm like, okay, Auckland's the White Ferns in this case. But then Canterbury collapse. So I'm thinking, well, I've seen that from the White Ferns before as well. So the Canterbury are the White Ferns team. It was so strange. It was so weird. It was kind of icky, and I want to move on from it. The best thing about Canterbury in that game day was Izzy Sharp batting. And batting for the woman, she had a fantastic innings, very powerful, clean hitter. She was smashing Molly Penfold around. Like Molly Penfold, she's meant to be the fast bowler of Aotearoa. She's bowled short. Izzy Sharp, the youngster, just pulls her for 4. No worries. And then you had Zach Foulkes. Zach Foulkes has played 2 really good short batting innings in the last 2 games. He hit the winning runs in Alexandra against Otago, and then he joined Daryl Mitchell late in that innings, and he had a good strike rate. He finished not out as well. So, and then he took the wicket of Sean Solier, and he was apart from Matt Henry's no wickets at 4 RPO, Zach Foulkes took 1 wicket at 5 RPO. So he was not their most economical bowler, but he was kind of their best bowler because he took a wicket. And that wicket was like, I don't know, I've seen some things that I was like, oh, I've seen that before. Like I made a clip of Izzy Sharp smashing boundaries. And she did that in the Super Smash against Auckland. I was like, oh, I've seen that before. This is like reinforcement of my perception that Izzy Sharp's really good. Zach Foulkes against Sean Solier. There's a clip from the Plunkett Shield last season where Zach Foulkes dismisses Jeet Raval twice in a game. Right arm, I think he's angling the ball into Jeet Raval, the lefty, but he swings it away from him. I always get my overs and around mixed up. I'm a terrible cricket fan, so I've got no idea which is which. But he angles the ball into Jeet Raval, swings it away. Outside edge twice. You can see Jeet Raval like looking like, oh my God, what's happening here? Sean Solier, super smash over the weekend. Zach Foulkes angles the ball into him, swings it away from him, off stump. See you later. Peak Zach Foulkes. Apart from a searing in-swinger Yorker to a right-hander. Or just like a good length delivery that goes through the gate of a right-hander. Like that's peak Zach Foulkes at the moment. Then we have Mohamed Abbas. Mohamed Abbas, who hit like 5 sixes on his Plunkett Shield debut. Many of which were him just rocking back to short deliveries that are kind of just good length deliveries. You just lean back, swivel, pull, 6 runs. And he was doing that yesterday against Central Districts. He also had a few classy shots, like the first boundary he hit, he just leaned on a chip shot down the ground, 4 runs. Later in the innings, he carved one over cover, 4 runs on the offside. But it was like Mohamed Abbas's breakout performance in the Super Smash featured a lot of shots that he played in the Plunkett Shield. And there was a lot of chat in the commentary around his innings, like how stagnant he looked in against Auckland, how he's like playing with good intent. I love how any good cricket now is just intent. Like it's just good intent. You just got to show intent. You got to be aggressive and have the intent. Like, okay, cool. But you also need to do whatever you need to do to win. And I think some of the stuff in Auckland was more situational, where Mohamed Abbas, a young batter, he was under the pump, hostile environment in Auckland, gappy day. Auckland's fizzing, is a bit of fizz in this podcast today. Mohamed Abbas is under pressure, and he needs to ride that pressure. Sure, he wasn't playing a whole lot of aggressive, free-flowing shots. However, he was grinding through a tough period of batting against Auckland. He felt more confident. The situation was better in Napier. What does Mohamed Abbas do? He's smashing boundaries. And he was also batting alongside Nick Kelly, good senior veteran for Wellington. And then old beastie Michael Bracewell, who, 2 things about Michael Bracewell. Think we got a 7-month recovery on a torn Achilles, ruptured Achilles, whatever. Because he last played in June.
That, yeah.
I'm not here to cast any doubt over the supplements or methods of Aotearoa cricketers, but we kind of think we had a 6-month turnaround for Kane Williamson doing his ACL, and then Michael Bracewell 6-7 months after a ruptured Achilles. Those are freaky turnarounds from major injuries. So whether they're on the Aotearoa vitamins, whether they're on the natural fungi of Aotearoa, whatever supplements they're on, they're doing well. And the training methods are doing well. Obviously, I think we are quite complimentary of Donaldson, the strength trainer, everything he does for the Black Caps. But I think everyone involved in New Zealand cricket deserves praise, because we've got 2 examples recently of Kane Williamson and Michael Bracewell returning quickly from major injuries. Second thing about Bracewell, every time I see him on TV, he looks bigger. I've never seen him in person. I've never stood next to him to really suss out his size, but they call him Beastie. And every time I see him on TV, he looks bigger. I said last summer about his hat. You can tell he's got a massive noggin because that hat is on full extension. And then I was paying attention to his arm guard, and I think a lot of the cricketers these days, I think Mark Chapman's got his own kind of arm guard sleeve thing that he's designed. I think a lot of cricketers wear that. But then you got the Kane Williamson, he wears the full arm guard. Michael Bracewell's kind of wearing a shin pad on his arm. Like these things, when you see them on TV and there's certain like situations where they're standing next to their teammates or they're standing next to the stumps, the umpire, or just whatever, you can kind of see things that just like, whoa, this dude's like a massive dude. And for some reason, it looked like Michael Bracewell was wearing a shin pad on his arm, which made me think this dude's massive. So that's a bit of Wellington funk there. I do want to highlight Amelia Kerr, Georgia Plimmer were fantastic for Wellington as well. You've got Hannah Rose playing really good cricket for Central. As I said, she is one of the leading run scorers. Wellington, 4 of their 5 wicket takers for the women are spinners. And I think I counted that 15 bowlers have taken at least 5 wickets. 7 of them are spinners. 4 of them are from Wellington. So Wellington women, they've just got a full-on spin attack. And also, another quirky little note, Natasha Kodai and Kate Chandler, 2 really good young talents for Wellington. But Kate Chandler on the mic yesterday was kind of hilarious. Like she had this thing where she needed to say like it's all about the journey, it's not about the destination, and she literally said it twice on both interviews. And they took the piss out of her, like, oh, was that a stitch up where you meant to say that? And she just like, the conversations weren't the best because they were like speaking over each other as we tend to do on the podcast. But you could tell Kate Chandler was just full of banter. Like she was just ready to go, hilarious. And then they stop the mic, but they catch her. She walks up to one of her teammates and they're like, and she's chuckling away and she says, they called me a mini Buddha. So it was just a good fun. One of the really good, wholesome moments of the player mic situation. But Kate Chandler seems like a really funny young lady. And she's also really good at batting, got a good leggy. Natasha Kodai has right arm outswing, which is really interesting because most of the female cricketers, a little bit more, get into my physics bag here, a little bit less torque, a little bit less energy through the crease. Most of the female bowlers, they bowl in-swing to right-handers. You don't have as many right-handers bowling outswing to right-handers. So when I see a young woman player bowling outswing, then you're like, okay, she's got good energy through the crease. She's got good pace to carry that outswing through to the batter. So she's a good young talent as well. Still think Wellington women have the best well, we've got Muhammad Abbas going Berko. We've got Tim Robinson going Berko. We've got Nathan Smith, one of the best players all season. He's in fantastic form. So I'm just going to say Wellington still have the best pipeline in Aotearoa cricket because, yeah, Nathan Smith, if not, I don't have the stats right in front of me right now, but he's definitely the best bowler in Super Smash and Plunkett Shield. So 2 extremes. He's the best bowler, and he's also got strike rates over 100 in the Ford Trophy. I think he's got a 111 strike rate batting in Ford Trophy. Small sample size, batting down the order. But in Super Smash, I think he's up to 180 odd. And I think I said this morning in my Super Smash Scout, Robinson's the only batter who has batted twice and has a higher strike rate than Nathan Smith. So that's the quality of cricketer, let alone his fielding. Because he's catching everything. He's a gun fielder as well. He's really good at cricket. And he's a bit older. I think he's 25 years old, so he's not a young gun. He's not like a Zach Foulkes or Muhammad Abbas. But he is one of the best domestic cricketers right now. And it's this weird situation where these youngsters are super talented. Like even Will Clark, who was playing for CD, didn't really do much in that game yesterday against Wellington. But you can see that he's a really classy young cricketer. So you got all those like Izzy Sharp, Chandler, Kodai, all those young players, Sky Bowden. But then you've also got Michael Bracewell, who, as you said in a podcast a few months ago around the World Cup time, we've forgotten about Michael Bracewell. But Michael Bracewell's really good at cricket, and he's still there. So you've got every level of domestic cricket covered. With the senior players, they're still among the best players, but you've got freaky youngsters, you've got really good certified mid-20s players. It's all on show in Super Smash, and I am loving Super Smash. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, I've wondered before why they call Michael Bracewell Beast. Like it's like you sort of you can figure it out by looking at him. Like even the picture behind you on the video screen, you see how small that ball looks in his hand. He's swallowing it up. Like you can see it, but he also isn't necessarily the first guy you'd think would grab that kind of like moniker. You know, he's quite soft spoken. He doesn't seem to be a like big outgoing personality or anything like that. But then I think that's it. I suspect it's one of those things where if you met him in person or shook his hand or things like that, you would understand immediately. Like you can get a glimpse of it on TV and certainly through watching how he bats and some of this stuff. But I suspect the in person experience is the one that really sells that. And yeah, I looked that up. The Achilles tendon tear recovery time. They say 6 to 9 months, and he was in that 6 to 7 month range of when he got back. That's pretty rapid. Not as rapid as Kane Williamson recovering from a 9 to 12 month injury in 6 months, which is just like unfathomable how he managed to do that. But that's quick. Bracewell's had a fairly sturdy recovery from that. Admittedly, like I think it might have been harder for a fast bowler to come back from that injury because you're thinking about like delivery strides and stuff like that. For a spinner and a batsman, that's not so rough, but it's a pretty sharp fielder too. That stuff isn't limited. So it's a remarkable recovery, and it's good to have him back because he would have been pretty bloody handy at that World Cup. Although if he was, then maybe we don't get the Glenn Phillips. Oh no, Glenn Phillips would have still been there. I don't even know who he would have played instead of, I guess, one of the extra pace ball. Oh no. Mark Chapman was starting a lot of games, wasn't he, in the World Cup? You'd get. I did see Mark Chapman actually bowling for Auckland the other day, so that was something. I'd almost forgotten that was a thing.
I think he's bowled in a couple of games.
Yeah, I think he might well have.
Let me just double check. I definitely took notice of that. I was like, oh, Chapman's he's having a trundle. He's having a bit of a bowl. He's seen Glenn Phillips having a crack. He wants to have a crack again. He's bowled in both Super Smash games so far. So he didn't bowl in the 8 games prior, which feature 6 internationals against Bangladesh and the last game of the World Cup, but he's definitely bowling in the Super Smash.
Has Muhammad Abbas bowled yet? Because I haven't seen it from him if he has, but he's obviously at his age, like the batting is a bit easier to get into the team than the bowling. But he is a tidy left arm sort of medium pacer as well, isn't he? Which is an aspect that will probably come into the form as he gets older and more experienced. He'll start to sort of unleash all the tools in his toolkit. But for now, he's sort of announcing himself as a big hitter, which actually he did a year ago in Blanket Shield, and that innings you mentioned on Tevu just smacks 90 odd. I think he might have got in that game. But he is also he is someone who forecasts in a couple of years down the line to be especially when you look at how other Black Caps batters have been manufactured into all-rounders, he already is someone who will be an all-rounder down the line. Similar to Zach Foulkes as well, as someone who can be an all-rounder when, as you've mentioned, how much he loves batting and how he opened a couple games in the Plunket Shield as a makeshift opener, and he didn't do that well, but he's scored runs at that level. He is a dude who can potentially bat 6 or 7, probably more of a 7 down the line, but if you're a first choice bowler who can swing the bat pretty nicely, these are handy things. Like these are multi-talented players that are coming through. These aren't just players who sort of have the one thing and everyone's good. Like I'm thinking this has been like Georgia Plimmer's flipping into the women's Super Smash, Georgia Plimmer's season, full stop. Not necessarily Super Smash because scored a big 100 in one of the Halliburton Johnson Shield games, which was probably the breakthrough innings, and since then she's been really good. batting, sure, but also her fielding is insane. She's a remarkable fielder. Like the all-round talent of these players that are getting developed is pretty handy. These are very, very useful things when it comes to putting a squad together with your like a national team trying to pick things, but also if you're that player trying to get opportunities, the more things you can do, the more reasons there are to pick you, right?
Yeah, again, as I say every podcast, this is no different to any other sport in New Zealand, though. The youngsters are phenomenal. There are next level footballers, rugby league players, basketball players, and cricketers who are doing things we don't really see Kiwi athletes do. Not to mention all the young cricketers. You did highlight a few points that I want to touch on individually. Georgia Plimmer, she's been dismissed once in 5 games, 5 innings.
Good for the average.
So if you can get Georgia Plimmer out, you're doing pretty well, because she has the most not outs in the Super Smash so far. She's got 4 not outs. Next best are Hannah Rowe and Susie Bates on 2 each. Muhammad Abbas, he's not bowling and he doesn't need to bowl. Like, why? Wellington don't need another bowler. They got Nathan Smith on 10 wickets, averaging 12. They've got Peter Younghusband on 10 wickets, averaging 12. They got the Dutch freak Logan van Beek. He's good at cricket. Ben Sears, he's there. He's all right. Ian McPeak is a really solid seamer who's played a lot of games, 4 games so far. He's kind of taken the steady job doing seamer role. You need another spinner. Bracewell's there. So there's like, Muhammad Abbas doesn't need to bowl. I'm sure he could bowl if they want him to. Wellington can basically rotate between Adam Milne and Ben Sears. Right, so they're all good for bowlers. They don't need Muhammad Abbas to bowl, but he does bowl nice, tidy left arm seam. You also mentioned Zach Foulkes. I reckon Zach Foulkes is a top 6 batter. But he's not a 7.
If you've opened in Plunkett Shield, you can. There's something there,
And I'm like, he bats 6 or something for Canterbury, most Plunkett Shield games. I think he's obviously, when you get into Super Smash, it is a weird stage of Super Smash because these Black Caps, they come, they go. So don't be judging all these teams on their Black Caps performances, because those Black Caps are going and then finals cricket rolls around. But that's the thing about Zach Foulkes is he's batting down the order for Canterbury in the Super Smash, where you need a bit more power. You need a bit more, whether it's power or just like if it's efficiency, which is usually like manifested through power. Like a Jimmy Nisha. Phenomenal batting strike rate, phenomenal bowling strike rate as well, through power. Zach Foulkes, I think he hit a massive, like a 6 down the ground in one of those games. Might have been against Auckland.
Yeah,
but he's just a good, classy batter. And those good, classy batters, they can up the ante in so many different ways. They don't need to smash a 6 down the ground. They can play a lap. They can carve one through point. They can find the gap between deep mid-wicket and long on. Those are like, it's kind of more about gaps and timing than it is about brutal power for some of those batters. Any other things, like, pick my brain here. I'm full of Super Smash information. Anything you want to know? Any young players? Any other intriguing talents?
Well, it's been a very long podcast, so I don't know. I'm not sure. I think we just did that. The intriguing talents.
Well, I've got a few more.
But by all means,
if you got somewhere to go, if you don't mind.
I do actually, but not yet.
Yeah. Marama Downs, seamer for Northern Districts. She's really good, accurate, bit of nibble. Love what she's doing. Obviously, you got PJ Watkins, the lefty for Otago. I don't think she bowled in the last game, which they lost against Northern, which was a bit weird, but she's still one of the best bowlers. Finn Allen, you might have won that little Finn Allen versus Tim Seifert battle for the week, because Tim Seifert hasn't done a whole lot, whereas Finn Allen's come back to Super Smash. And he's got 154 runs at a strike rate of 177, so he's doing pretty well. Dean Foxcroft, this is another thing. Dean Foxcroft is a T20 legend. He's not quite Chris Harris, legendary status, but Dean Foxcroft does have the third highest New Zealand T20 batting average. He's behind Devon Conway, but he's also ahead of Rob O'Donnell. So just something to watch out for. Something to watch out for with Dean Foxcroft and Rob O'Donnell. Rob O'Donnell, again, those black caps come and go. Rob O'Donnell just stays consistent. And I did enjoy the Bracewell versus Bracewell battle. That was obviously a fun little thing as well.
Michael hit him for 6 at one point, didn't he?
He certainly did. And another player to watch out for is Jake Gibson. Otago, he's a good bowler. He's one of Otago's leading wicket takers. And he also opens the batting and just goes bang. So watch out for Jake Gibson. I don't know if he's going to score many runs because he does have a volatile style, but he's got 79 runs at a strike rate of 146. And if you're doing that, opening the batting while also taking wickets, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. And while on the topic of big strike rates, I do love how we got PJ Watkins and we got BJ Jacobs. I think it's Poppy J. Watkins and Bevan John Jacobs. So we've got a PJ, we've got a BJ. BJ Jacobs, he didn't play when Canterbury are at full strength with all their black caps, but if those black caps go and BJ Jacobs comes back into the lineup, watch out for him. He's got 61 runs at a strike rate of 190. So then you're getting into that Canterbury lower order where you've got Rapon, Foulkes, Jacobs, Angus McKenzie is quite a good batter as well. I could go on, but we do need to finish this podcast. So we might wrap it up there. How about that?